I have the pleasure of introducing Nicole Ramos. So she is the director of the Border Right Project of Otro Lado. So Otro Lado is a binational legal services organization with offices in both Los Angeles and in Tijuana, Mexico. So the project provides legal orientation and know your rights training to migrants in Tijuana who wish to present themselves to U.S. authorities in order to seek asylum. The Border Right Project conducts daily human rights monitoring at the port of entry and engages in broader legislative, media, and legal advocacy efforts to challenge systematic human rights violations committed by state actors, including 3 class action lawsuits: Al Otro Lado versus Nielsen, East Bay Sanctuary Covenant versus Trump, and Innovation Law Lab versus Nielsen. Since the arrival of the Central American exodus in November, Al Otro Lado has served over 2,500 asylum seekers in Tijuana. Prior to joining Al Otro Lado, Nicole worked for 6 years as an assistant federal public defender in Montgomery, Alabama, where she represented the clients charged with federal felony offenses and death row inmates challenging their convictions and death sentences in federal court. She is a graduate of Bryn Mawr College and Temple University, James E. Beasley School of Law. Round of applause, please.
And then we had this population, which many people refer to as economic migrants, and I hate that term, and the reason why I hate that term is because it ignores the structural violence that the United States government has wreaked upon Mexico and Central America with our foreign policy, our propping up of puppet democracies and friendly dictatorships, and our support of transnational corporations that have dispossessed indigenous people from their lands. So I did what every fiscally responsible person would do, and I liquidated my retirement savings, and I went to Mexico with no idea what I was going to do, but that I felt that I needed to do something. And so I began volunteering in different shelters and giving consults to deportees and asylum seekers and economic migrants. And it very quickly became apparent to me that asylum seekers were not getting access to the port of entry. And I was first approached in December 2015 by this gentleman named Jose from El Salvador with his 3 children. Now, Jose didn't have an economic need to migrate. He had a very successful business in El Salvador. He had 1 home that was already built, and he was building a home for his mother, and he had 2 cars, and his children were in private school. And he had been paying rent to the gangs for years because that was the price of living in El Salvador, until one day they came and demanded a price that he couldn't pay. And they said, if you don't pay, we're going to kill your children. And Jose knew they meant business because they knew the names of his children, they knew where they went to school. And one day they had kidnapped his oldest son, who was 16, and they took him up into the mountains because Jose couldn't afford to pay that higher price. And they beat him up, and they stabbed him, and just before they were going to kill him, they got distracted. Thank God they got distracted, because Christian threw himself off the side of a mountain and rolled down as they shot at him, and he got away. And Jose realized he couldn't stay anymore. He had to leave his house, he had to leave the rest of his family and his community, and he took his children and he ran. And I met Jose at Casa Migrante in December of 2015, and he asked me, he said, will you please go with me to the port of entry, La Linea, that's what they call it. I need for you to come with me to explain myself to the U.S. officials. And I said to Jose, I said, federal law is very clear. If you present yourself to U.S. immigration officials and you say that you're there to seek asylum, they are supposed to take you immediately in. There is nothing in federal law or the promulgating regulations that say that we can have a wait list or we can delegate processing authorities of asylum seekers to a foreign government with its own history of human rights abuses. There's nothing in the law that says that. And and Jose, when I said how simple it was, he looked at me and gave me this glance. He said, you really don't know what's going on here, do you? And I thought to myself, I said, maybe it's that he's scared. Maybe it's because he's a parent and he's come this far and he wants a person who's a U.S. citizen, who's an attorney, who's a person of privilege to walk with him on this journey. And I said, okay, I'll go with you. So I decided to do a little recon mission, and I went and walked through the port of entry as I had done so many times before. And I always remembered that there was this group of people to the left that never seemed to really be moving and always had a lot of things and always looked really tired. And so I made a beeline for that group of people, and I said, what are you doing here? And they said, we are asylum seekers. We're waiting for the Americans to process us. And that said to me, okay, I don't know exactly what this process looks like, but there is a process. And so the next week I went back with Jose and his children, and we walked up to the CBP officer, and I explained why we were there. And he looked at me incredulously and said, asylum seekers, they need to go back to the embassy in their own country. And I said, they're from El Salvador. That is thousands of miles away, and they're not going back. And he said, well, they need to go to the U.S. consulate here in Tijuana. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, that's not how this works. The law says we come here. And I said, well, who are you? And I said, well, sir, I'm an attorney. And he said, well, are you a Mexican attorney or a U.S. attorney? As if that should matter. And I said, well, sir, I'm a U.S. attorney, and here's my card. And I had just gotten them printed a week and a half before because I felt like I needed to look legitimate. And while he's looking at my card, I sensed my opening, and I said, I know there's a process. The asylum seekers are behind that gate, and they're lined up to the left, and that's where we have to go. And he looked at me, and I had been, in federal court for 6 years as a trial attorney, so I had gotten used to bluffing a little bit and looking confident. And I guess I looked real confident because he let us go in. And it was a light bulb moment to me that if this federal officer who has taken an oath to uphold federal law, whether he likes it or not, is willing to lie to me, a U.S. citizen, and an officer of the court, imagine how many lies they are telling to other people. Imagine all the people that are coming without advocates. Well, after Jose got out of detention, I think he called everyone he knew, because my cell phone became a very scary place. And to this day, I still can't bear to change the number because I always think, what if someone needs me? Because I've gotten many people who knew a friend who knew a friend who knew a friend who knew Jose. And so I began taking asylum seekers to the port of entry first as individuals, then in smaller groups, then in larger groups. I think the largest group I ever accompanied was 41 individuals, including adults and children. CBP at first didn't know what to make of me. Then they started to become irritated, angry. I thought maybe it's a lack of training, right? Because the agency is not known to draw from the top of the pile of applications. And so I photocopied the relevant federal code, and I printed out relevant testimony from the CBP commissioner before Congress about what their job is, what they're supposed to do with asylum seekers when they approach the gate. And I highlighted the relevant portions, and I brought it with me, and I said, no, this is what you're supposed to do. It's right here. They didn't think it was as clever as I did. And then the very bad thing happened in 2016, and we elected the white nationalist who sits in our White House. And the border all but closed to asylum seekers. And CBP officers started to become incredibly aggressive. Some of them said to me, we know who you are and what you do. We know you're coaching them to lie. As if I could make up all the horror stories that my clients have told me. And then after President Trump, although it pains me to say that name, was inaugurated in 2017, 6 days after I went to the port of entry with a Turkish asylum seeker who would later go on to win his claim. And we were denied access completely. And the CBP supervisor on that evening, because I used to like to go at night, because I'm considerate about cross-border pedestrians. I want you to get through quickly, and I know it might take a while for us, said that they weren't going to process him, that he needed to go, if we didn't move, that she was going to call Mexican authorities to take us out of that port of entry and detain us. And her name was Supervisor Gomez, and I like to say her name at every public talk because I want to thank her for making me fearless, furious, and fierce. And I think it's important we thank those that make us who we are today. So thank you, Supervisor Gomez. Around this time, my co-directors, Nora Phillips and Erica Pinheiro, who were both in LA at the time, we were sitting down and we were thinking, what are we going to do? This is becoming untenable. And Nora had her own private law office, and Erica worked for a nonprofit called Carecen that works with migrants in various cities in the United States. And they did what any fiscally responsible people would do, is they quit their jobs. Because we knew we didn't have any money, but we had a treasure trove of evidence against government misconduct. And we knew we could do something with that. And so they quit their jobs. I continued not having a job. And we decided that we were going to sue the US government. And so we took our evidence around to nonprofit organizations that were bigger and badder and more financed than us. And we said, will you help us sue? Because we have all the data. We have all of the declarations. And our case was picked up by the American Immigration Council and the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Center for Constitutional Rights. And that case is Otro, Lado, Binational, and we have oral argument in that case next week. And that case deals, thank you, with asylum seekers being turned away from the port of entry and this illegal wait list that the US government operates in collaboration with the Mexican government. Now, they will tell you, the newspapers, they will say in the news that asylum seekers have miraculously, from all these different countries in the world, have self-organized themselves to run a wait list to make it more organized to enter the US. That is a lie. CBP tells Mexican immigration every single day how many numbers of people that it's going to take, and those are the people that are let in. Unfortunately, the Mexican government that helps run this list denies access to this list to people whose identity documents don't correspond with their gender presentation. Unaccompanied minors, the most vulnerable among us, children we should all be getting behind to protect, are denied access to this list, and instead threatened that they will be placed in child protective services in Mexico and then sent back to their countries of origin. Black asylum seekers who may not have their original documents try to access this list and are told that they can't because they don't have their original documents. It's a problem. And we monitor this at the port of entry every single day, in addition to conducting a daily legal clinic where we educate asylum seekers about the process in the United States, the horrors that they may face in the detention, what their rights are, and what they can say to officials to try and protect their rights, such as, no, I want an interview with an asylum officer. No, I will not sign that document in English that may be deporting me. No, you cannot take my children. And we can't do this. We can't serve the thousands of people that we've served without your help. And so many people think, I'm not a lawyer, or I don't speak Spanish, therefore I cannot help. At our Border Rights Project, we have served asylum seekers, over 3,000 asylum seekers since November, from 50 different countries, speaking 15 different languages. So yes, you can help. And we haven't done it because we've had an army of attorneys show up at the border. Because I don't know if you know this, but attorneys are really busy, important people. So we've done it because we've had people from our community who have stood up, social workers, people of faith, teachers, all kinds of people have come to help us do this preparation for what to expect to enter the U.S. system. And yes, we do have attorneys that come in and we supervise the intake process. We make sure that people are getting the correct information and the final evaluation of their case. But this is a project that is built by people of conscience across all different jobs, across all different languages, across all different ages, coming from all over the world, because we are going to stand up to the United States government, which is no longer the U.S. champion of human rights, but it is the bully, and it is the architect of genocide that is being carried out in our names with our tax dollars. So I ask you, I beg you, if this touches your heart, if you look at the headlines and you think, how can this be my country? If your conscience calls you, please come to Tijuana, because we need you.